They say a single moment can split your life into before and after. I didn't believe that until our anniversary dinner. 12 years. That's how long we'd been married. I booked the same restaurant where I proposed, La Mer Rouge. Candlelight, white linens, soft jazz. She always loved that place. Her name is Chloe, and for most of those years, I truly believed she loved me. I dressed in the blue button-down she once called her favorite, and Chloe wore a black satin dress that made heads turn when we walked in. Everything felt good. A little distant, maybe, but couples go through phases, right? She smiled at me, held my hand across the table, and told me I still looked handsome for a guy pushing 40. I laughed. She always had that sarcastic edge. Dinner was perfect. Steak for me, halibut for her, a bottle of red we both liked. And just before dessert, I did something dumb. I stood up, kissed her on the cheek, and told her I was going to settle the bill. I wanted to surprise her. I'd asked the waiter earlier to include a special note on the receipt. Here's to many more. I thought it would make her smile. I wish I hadn't gotten up. When I came back, I slowed down near the booth behind ours, just waiting for the server who had the check. That's when I heard her laugh. My wife's laugh, not the soft giggle she gives me. This was fuller, freer, and flirtier. And then came the words. You know, if he ever found out, I think he'd just quietly leave. He's not the kind to explode. He'd probably just disappear. Silence. Then more laughter. Not just hers. A man's voice, confident and familiar. That's what makes it easier. Babe, you married a puppy, not a wolf. I froze. My brain tried to tell me I'd misunderstood, that she was joking, that it was about something else entirely, that she wasn't talking about me. But then she said, as casually as ordering another glass of wine, "This will be the last anniversary I fake." Something inside me shattered. I didn't go back to the table right away. I stood there numb, staring at the flickering candle in the booth's reflection. Then I took a deep breath, turned around slowly, and walked back as if I'd heard nothing. Chloe was mid-sip when I sat down. "Everything okay?" she asked, with that same charming smile. "Perfect," I said. I lied. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask. I didn't cry. Not that night. I watched her finish her dessert. I watched her thank the server. I watched her fix her lipstick in the mirror by the door. The whole time, I wondered who he was. I replayed the voice, the laugh, the tone. I knew it wasn't a stranger. That voice had history. My mind spiraled through our friends, neighbors, even coworkers. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the bathroom for 3 hours, just sitting on the cold tile, phone in hand, trying to decide if I wanted to know the truth or if I already did. I decided I would find out everything. Not with drama, not with yelling, with proof. And what I found would change my life forever. The next morning was a master class in pretending. Chloe was humming in the kitchen like nothing had happened. She made coffee, toasted some sourdough, and asked if I wanted eggs. I looked at her like she was a stranger wearing my wife's face. I told her I was skipping breakfast, something about being late for work, and left 20 minutes earlier than I needed to. I sat in my car around the corner, hands gripping the steering wheel, pulse in my throat. I wasn't just angry. I was unraveling, but not in the way you might expect. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. I wanted answers. That's when I remembered a friend of mine, Kevin. We'd gone to college together. He ran a cybersecurity firm now and had always been good with the sneaky stuff. I called him up and asked for coffee. Told him I needed to ask about something personal. He said, sure. We met at a spot halfway between our places, and I laid it out in simple words. I think Chloe is cheating. I need proof. Quietly. Kevin didn't ask many questions. He just nodded and said, "You want eyes or ears?" "Both," I said. "But nothing illegal. I'm not trying to go to jail. I just want to know the truth." He smiled faintly. There are ways. That afternoon, I handed him one of our old tablets and a spare phone I'd kept from an upgrade. Kevin said he could install discrete tracking software, connect the devices so I could monitor certain calls, texts, and GPS without her knowing. I hesitated for a second. This felt like a betrayal, but then I remembered her words. This will be the last anniversary I fake. That wasn't love. That wasn't even decency. By the weekend, I had the tools I needed. I didn't confront her. I just watched. And what I started seeing didn't feel real. It started with subtle stuff. Messages at odd hours to a contact named M. Calendar entries that looked like fake Pilates sessions. A location ping at a hotel downtown on a Thursday afternoon. But then came the big one. A forwarded email with attached receipts for 2 spa packages at a resort I'd never even heard of, billed to her personal credit card. One of the names on the receipt was Mark Lindley. That name hit me like a truck. Mark was my former boss. We'd worked together for 4 years. I'd helped him through a rough divorce. We did beers, BBQs. He'd sat at my dinner table. And he was the man in that booth? The voice made sense now. Confident, familiar, condescending. I sat on the edge of our bed that night and stared at Chloe while she scrolled through her phone, smirking at something on the screen. I imagined smashing the device from her hands, but I didn't. I wasn't going to react. I was going to prepare. So I started my own kind of war. Quiet, strategic. I created a private folder in the cloud and named it something meaningless. Tax Prep 2021. In it, I saved screenshots of messages, GPS data, email trails, and eventually photos, because I didn't stop at digital evidence. Kevin helped me plant a tiny pinhole camera in the rearview mirror of Chloe's car, another one under her vanity in the master bathroom, where she often took calls while getting ready. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I was turning into someone methodical, calm, dangerous even. But the worst was still ahead. Because one evening, 3 weeks into my quiet surveillance, Chloe came home with a noticeable change. Her smile was bigger, she was singing along to the radio, she kissed my cheek before heading upstairs. And later that night, while she showered, a new message came in from Mark. Same hotel next Tuesday. I'll bring the wine this time. You bring that dress I like. Unless your husband has finally caught on. She replied 3 minutes later while drying her hair. He's clueless. He's always been clueless. I could leave for a week and he'd think I was at a conference. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen, memorizing every word. She thought I was clueless? She had no idea I was about to change everything. The days leading up to Tuesday felt like walking on glass barefoot. Every second was silent, sharp, and agonizing. I acted normal, smiled when needed, nodded in conversations, slept beside her like everything was fine. But inside, I was rehearsing every detail of what I needed to do. Kevin had offered to follow her that Tuesday. I'll keep my distance. Snap what you need. You don't need to see it yourself, man, he said, as if doing me a favor. But I told him no. I needed to see. Not because I was a masochist, but because this wasn't just suspicion anymore. I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was tracking reality. And if I didn't face it now, it would haunt me forever. Tuesday came like a storm wrapped in sunshine. Chloe left home at 11:20 a.m., dressed in the same black satin dress she wore to our anniversary dinner. She kissed me on the cheek and said she had a client lunch followed by a leadership seminar. I just nodded and handed her a travel mug of coffee, one I'd slipped a tracker into the base of. She wouldn't even notice. She never did. She always underestimated me. I waited 15 minutes, grabbed my camera bag, and followed the GPS signal from a parked rental car I'd reserved under a fake name. My hands didn't shake, my breathing was steady. Maybe I'd gone numb. Or maybe I had just finally become what she expected me to be. The man who knew and said nothing. Yet, she didn't go to any conference. She went straight to the Elmswood, a mid-tier boutique hotel about 30 minutes from our neighborhood. Not fancy, not trashy, just forgettable. The kind of place that doesn't ask questions and takes cash at the front desk. I parked across the street behind a florist van and watched her step out of the car with her phone in hand and a smile on her lips, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She didn't wait long. 5 minutes later, Mark's Tesla pulled up. He didn't even park properly, just slid into a red zone, popped out in jeans and a crisp blazer, and gave her a quick kiss right on the mouth. They laughed like they were teenagers sneaking away from homecoming. I took photos, videos, high res. No questions, no doubts. They walked inside, arm in arm. She looked back once, maybe out of habit, but I ducked just enough behind the van's side mirror to avoid being spotted. She didn't see me. Of course she didn't. I was invisible to her now, had been for a long time. They stayed inside for over 2 hours. I didn't move, I didn't eat. Just sat there listening to the quiet hum of the street, wondering how many times this had happened before. How many meetings, Pilates sessions, work dinners had been elaborate lies to cover this twisted escape. And what hurt most wasn't even the physical betrayal. It was that she laughed with him, that her whole body seemed lighter in his presence. She was a different woman with him, more alive, more playful, more real. Around 2:40 p.m., they came back out. Her hair was messier, her lipstick gone, but she looked pleased. He smacked her rear as she got in her car. She didn't even flinch. She just giggled and told him to text her later once he was alone. Then they drove off in separate directions like it was nothing. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I had what I needed. That night, she came home around 6 p.m. with takeout in hand. Didn't feel like cooking, she said with a yawn. That seminar was brutal. I sat across from her, eating pad thai and wondering if she'd washed his scent off her skin or just sprayed perfume over it. She told me about her day, how the client was annoying, how the speaker had a weird accent and a slide deck from 2006. She was good. I almost believed her. Almost. But in the middle of her story, I interrupted casually. "What's the Elmswood?" She blinked. Just once. A little too long. Her smile faltered but quickly returned. "Huh?" "I saw a receipt in the car," I lied, "for a coffee at the Elmswood." Oh, that. Yeah, we stopped there after the seminar for a quick bite. I think the name was on the napkins. I tossed it though. Quick, confident, almost seamless, but not quite, because her eyes had given her away. Chloe had forgotten who I really was. She thought I was a puppy. She hadn't yet realized that I had teeth, and I wasn't afraid to use them. The night after I saw her with Mark, something inside me shifted. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth, looking at the man staring back. For years, Chloe had told me I was too soft, too agreeable, too passive. I thought that was love, the kind that stays calm, that listens, that compromises. But looking into my own eyes that night, I didn't see a man built for compromise anymore. I saw a man sharpening himself in silence. The next day at work, I called in sick. I needed time, and not to cry or sulk, but to plan. I laid out every piece of evidence I had so far. Texts, GPS records, videos, audio clips, photos of them at the hotel, phone logs, financial statements. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a documented affair. Mark Lindley, my former boss, was systematically invading my marriage like a parasite. But the real betrayal wasn't just his. Chloe had given him access, repeatedly, willingly. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about cheating. It was a long-term deception, financially, emotionally, sexually. And worse, she was preparing for something. Those spa receipts, the way she suddenly started asking casual questions like, "Have you ever thought about moving to a smaller place?" Or, "What would you do if you had a fresh start somewhere else?" These weren't innocent questions. They were soft launches for a future where I didn't exist. So, I started thinking 2 steps ahead. I went to the bank and checked our joint account balances. I printed every statement. Then I quietly opened a new private checking account under my name only and transferred half of our liquid assets. Nothing illegal, just fair. I didn't touch the mortgage or long-term investments, just the cash. Enough to make her nervous, but not enough to trigger a confrontation. I also called a divorce attorney, not to file, not yet, but to understand my position. Her name was Allison Grant. She was sharp, direct, and didn't sugarcoat anything. When you've got proof of adultery this strong, especially with financial misrepresentation, you've got leverage, she told me. But don't move too fast. Let her hang herself a little further. I remember that phrase, let her hang herself a little further. It stuck with me like a mantra. So I waited. Chloe grew bolder. She started staying out late with colleagues. She began locking her phone when she never used to. She giggled at texts she didn't show me. She even started criticizing me more openly. Comments about how I was too boring lately, how I didn't initiate anything, how she felt like we were growing apart. I agreed with her every time. Maybe we are, I said once, just to see how she'd react. She smiled like I was making it easier for her. The next evening, I caught her leaving the bedroom while texting. I followed quietly, barefoot, just out of her line of sight. She went into the guest room, shut the door, and took a call. Kevin's mic, planted in the hallway smoke detector, caught it clearly. I told you he won't fight back. He's not built that way. Then laughter, hers and Mark's. He's like an old dog. He'll just roll over and let go. I paused the recording and stared at the waveform on my screen. Old dog, roll over, let go. That was it. But I wasn't done yet. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I snuck into the guest room and checked her purse. She never changed her passcode. Same 4 digits since college. I opened her phone and scrolled through her notes app. There it was, a drafted message to Mark. If I move in with you after everything is settled, will your kids hate me? I'm trying to imagine what it'd be like to start fresh, just us. I'm ready to be free of this life. I stared at it for a full minute. She had already left me in her mind. She was rehearsing the breakup. She had no idea I was rehearsing too. But mine was a performance with a twist. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make her believe everything was perfect right until the moment I vanished. Because Chloe thought I'd disappear quietly. She had no idea how loud silence could be. If someone had asked Chloe back then how our marriage was going, I'm sure she would have said it was fading, that I had changed, that I wasn't as engaged anymore. And she would have been right, except she thought it was because I was slipping away. What she didn't realize was that I was dismantling my presence piece by piece. I started with the small things. I deleted old photos of us from my social media, just a few at first, so it wouldn't raise flags. I stopped tagging her in anything. I removed our anniversary date from my bios. Then I backed up all of our financials, insurance policies, tax records, and property documents to an encrypted drive. Anything that had both our names on it, I made a digital copy and, in most cases, quietly filed for my removal. I hired a second lawyer, this one for estate matters, and began adjusting my will. The old version left everything to her. The new one didn't even mention her name. She noticed none of it. She was too busy pretending she still had to lie. One afternoon, she told me she'd be out of town for 3 days on a corporate retreat in Denver. I knew it was a lie the moment she said it. There was no work bag, no itinerary, no mention of who else was going. But I smiled and nodded and said, "That's great, you deserve a break." That Friday, after she left, I checked her GPS. She was at a lake house 2 hours outside the city, one Mark Lindley had inherited after his divorce, a quiet little escape with a private dock and no curious neighbors. I didn't drive out there. I didn't want more photos. I already had enough. Instead, I spent that weekend erasing her from the future. I closed our joint credit cards and ordered replacements under my own account. I boxed up the sentimental things, wedding albums, anniversary cards, the goofy keychains we got on our honeymoon, and put them in a storage unit under a rental agreement she'd never find. I created a new email address, set up a new phone line, and forwarded copies of every relevant conversation and photo into a single digital folder labeled Truth. Then I wrote a letter. It was 3 pages long. I didn't pour my heart out. I didn't try to change her mind. I just told her what I'd seen, what I knew, what she had said when she didn't think I was listening. I listed the dates, the places, the moments, and at the end, I wrote one line that I underlined 3 times. You didn't lose me because you cheated. You lost me because you thought I was too weak to notice. After the weekend, she came back tanned, relaxed, with a fresh manicure. She acted like nothing had happened, told me the trip was invigorating, and asked if I missed her. I said I had. She smiled, satisfied with the lie. She thought it worked. But something changed in her after that. I think she could sense it, not in what I said, but in what I didn't. I stopped initiating conversations. I stopped sharing my thoughts. I stopped reacting. She noticed. One night, while we sat on the couch watching some mindless reality show, she asked, "Is everything okay with us?" I paused, turned to her slowly. "Why wouldn't it be?" She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for a hint of meaning, but I had trained myself. No emotion, just stillness. "Well, I don't know," she said. "You just feel distant." I nodded and said, "We're probably just tired." She nodded too, but she didn't believe it. The next few days were quiet. She started being oddly attentive, bringing me coffee, asking about my day, even offering to plan a weekend getaway for us. I said it sounded nice. She smiled again, but behind her smile, I saw it. Uncertainty, maybe even guilt, a crack in her confidence. She thought she was still in control. But what she didn't know was that I'd already booked a one-way flight, set up a temporary place in another state, transferred what I needed, spoke to my employer about remote work options under a new identity, set up mail forwarding to a secure P.O. box. Everything was ready. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. And it came the day she made the mistake of inviting Mark over while she thought I was out of town. She didn't know I'd installed a motion alert system in the backyard. She didn't know I got the notification while sitting in a diner less than 10 blocks away. She didn't know that as they laughed in my living room, I was already on my way home. And she definitely didn't know I had the camera rolling when I walked through the door. I don't think Chloe even heard the door open. Maybe it was the music playing softly in the background. Maybe she was too busy laughing at something Mark had whispered to her while pouring wine into my favorite whiskey glass. Or, and this is what I believe, she'd grown so confident in her lies that the idea of me ever walking in on them simply never crossed her mind. The moment froze when I stepped into the living room. I'll never forget how quiet it suddenly became. Mark turned first. His smile dropped so fast it was almost funny. Chloe, facing the fireplace, looked over her shoulder with a laugh still on her lips. When she saw me, her face shifted in stages: confusion, fear, calculation. Then came the performance. "Wait, what are you doing here?" she asked, moving toward me like she was expecting me to fall for the act. "I live here," I said, calm as ever. "Do you remember that?" Mark stepped back, eyes scanning the room, probably looking for a way out. His hands were shaking. I never realized how weak he was until I saw him in that moment, standing in another man's home, holding a drink that wasn't his. Chloe tried again. "I thought you said you were out of town until Friday." "I was," I replied. "Plans changed." I could have screamed. I could have thrown him out, broken something, called the police, threatened her, cried, collapsed, made a scene. But instead, I placed a small black device on the table and clicked a button. The TV turned on. Footage played. Chloe and Mark entering the house an hour earlier. Chloe pulling him close by the collar. Chloe whispering something in his ear before taking off her coat. Mark kissing her neck. Her laughing, leading him upstairs like it was a routine they'd rehearsed. I let it play in silence. Chloe froze. Mark looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. When the video ended, I turned the screen off and looked her in the eyes. "I know everything. I've known for a long time. This, I gestured to the living room, was just the final note. Chloe opened her mouth, but no words came out. Mark backed toward the door. "Don't," I said to him. "You can stay or you can go. Doesn't matter. Your part in this is over." He bolted, didn't even put his shoes on, left them by the couch. The door slammed shut behind him. Chloe slowly sat down on the edge of the couch, like her body had suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. She didn't cry, she didn't yell, she just stared at the floor. "I don't know what to say," she muttered. "Don't," said I replied. "I'm not here to fix it. I just wanted you to see the truth before I go." "Go where?" her voice cracked. I stepped forward, pulled an envelope from my coat pocket, and placed it on the table beside the now empty glass. Inside were the divorce papers, copies of the evidence, a detailed breakdown of how I'd removed myself from our joint finances, and the letter I'd written, 3 pages, signed and dated, telling her everything she refused to ask. "I'm not staying here tonight, and I won't be here tomorrow. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll find all the instructions inside." She didn't touch the envelope. Her hands just rested on her lap, like she was too scared to move. I stood there for one more second, long enough to memorize the moment she finally realized she'd lost everything. Not just me, but the life she thought she could manipulate. The version of me she thought she had on a leash. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't take much. Just a backpack with the essentials and a folder of everything that mattered. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even lock it. Let her sit with the silence. That night, I checked into a modest hotel an hour away. Not because I needed the distance, but because I needed to feel what freedom actually tasted like. And for the first time in years, I slept. Not just rest my eyes sleep. Not the kind where your brain keeps running even when your body is still. I mean real, peaceful, guilt-free, dreamless sleep. Because she no longer had a place in my future, and she finally knew it. The morning after I left, I woke up in a hotel room that smelled faintly of old carpet and fresh coffee. Sunlight came through the blinds in a way I hadn't seen in years, soft, unobstructed, and untouched by the weight of pretending. There were no footsteps down the hall, no passive-aggressive sighs from the kitchen, no questions about where I was going or why I wasn't talking. Just quiet. Just me. It was a strange kind of peace. Not joyful, not sad, just clean, like the air after a thunderstorm. I checked my phone, half expecting it to be flooded with missed calls and desperate messages, but there were only 3 texts. The first, "Where are you?" The second, "We need to talk, please." The third came around 3 a.m. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I made a mistake. Please come home. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went for a walk just around the block. I passed a bakery, a bookstore, a dog groomer's. Life was happening everywhere. People drinking coffee, laughing into phones, walking dogs, reading newspapers. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I still had a place in it. Not as a husband, not as someone's plan B, just as myself. Around noon, I stopped by a quiet cafe and pulled out my laptop. I logged into my cloud folder, the one with all the proof, and made one last copy to a secure drive, then deleted the originals from my phone and tablet. I didn't want to carry them anymore. That chapter was documented, sealed, and out of my hands. She could deny it all she wanted, but the truth didn't need my help anymore. That afternoon, I met with my divorce attorney in person for the first time. Allison had this way of making everything feel like business, even the emotional parts. We finalized the next steps. Chloe would be served within 48 hours. All assets had been divided, and my relocation was already in process. She asked me if I wanted to include the photos in the filing. I said, no. She knows what she did. I don't need the court to remind her. Classy, Allison said. Most people don't handle it like this. I didn't feel classy. I felt hollow, but I also felt proud. 2 days later, I got confirmation that Chloe had been served. According to the courier, she didn't say a word when she accepted the envelope. just nodded and closed the door. Then the phone calls began, dozens of them. She switched from panic to anger to guilt to bargaining. One voicemail said she missed me. Another accused me of being manipulative for not letting her explain. One even claimed she was just confused and that she never meant to hurt me. But every message had the same undertone. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught. The most surreal call came from Mark. Yes, he called me. He left a voicemail that started with, "Look, man, I know you're probably pissed." Then he went on to explain that he and Chloe were genuinely connected and that he didn't want this to get ugly. He sounded nervous, like he thought I was going to come after him. Maybe he expected that. Maybe that's what he would have done in my shoes. But I didn't return his call either. You see, the real revenge wasn't in screaming or public humiliation. The real revenge was letting them end up together. Two selfish people built on lies, looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives, wondering when karma would show up. Meanwhile, I was already gone. I signed a lease in a coastal town I'd always wanted to visit. Just a small apartment, nothing special, but it was mine. I changed my phone number, took a new job offer that let me work freelance. I got a rescue dog named Buck, who didn't care where I'd come from or what I'd lost. He just cared that I showed up and threw the ball when he brought it. One afternoon, maybe 2 weeks after everything, I sat on a park bench watching Buck chase waves. I had a coffee in one hand and a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't need closure from Chloe. I didn't need her to beg or apologize or understand what she destroyed. The truth was, I'd already won. I got out. I didn't lose myself to bitterness. I didn't let her define the rest of my life. And as far as she knew, I vanished. But I wasn't gone. I was just starting over. A month passed, then 2. By the 3rd, I'd stopped checking my old email entirely. The number was deactivated. The storage unit was cleared. I sold the last car we'd co-signed on, changed my license, and legally updated my address. On paper and in life, Chloe no longer existed beside my name. But strangely, I didn't feel like a man who had just lost everything. I felt like a man who had finally put something toxic to rest. One quiet Sunday morning, I woke up before sunrise. Buck was curled up at the foot of the bed, snoring softly. Outside, the ocean was calm. I brewed coffee, grabbed a notepad, and sat by the open window. The breeze smelled like salt and pine. I hadn't written in years, just scribbled ideas, thoughts. But that morning, words poured out. Not about her, not about betrayal, but about what comes next. I made a list, not of goals, not like a bucket list, just simple things I wanted for myself. Talk to people without hiding. Wake up without checking someone else's mood. Laugh without wondering if it's okay. Fall in love again, but only when I'm whole. I looked at that last line for a while. The old version of me would have laughed it off, said something cynical, maybe even crossed it out. But not now. I didn't need it to happen next week or next year. I just wanted to believe that when the right person came, I'd be ready. Not broken, not guarded, just me, honest, present. And I wasn't rushing toward anything. That was the difference. I went back to therapy, not because I was shattered, but because I wanted to understand what made me stay so long in something that starved me of affection and trust. My therapist said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't leaving, it's not running back after you do. And I didn't run back, not even once. One evening about 4 months in, I bumped into someone new. Her name was Clara. She was at the same dog park as me, throwing a tennis ball for her husky, and Buck ran straight toward her like he'd known her his whole life. We laughed, talked, nothing forced, no flirting games or false fronts, just two people standing in the soft light of early evening, letting a conversation unfold. I didn't tell her my story, not yet, but I smiled when I realized something halfway through our talk. I wasn't thinking about Chloe, not even a little. And in that moment, I knew I had made it out, not just physically, emotionally. Because healing isn't dramatic, It's not some grand revelation with music swelling in the background. Sometimes, healing is just standing there, watching your dog chase someone else's across a field and realizing you feel light again, free, whole. So if you're reading this, whether you've been betrayed, lost, or left behind, just know you can leave and still keep your soul intact. You can survive it without revenge, without bitterness, without becoming someone you hate. And maybe, just maybe, you'll sit on your own bench someday, look out at the world, and realize the life you thought was over was just your beginning.